Welcome to today's Path to Med episode. I'm your host, Suhani, and my guest today is Anika Chhabra. Anika is a fourth-year student in the prestigious Health Sciences program at McMaster University, and she's been actively involved on campus as a faculty representative, has served on the Bachelor of Health Sciences Society's first-year council chair, and has taken on mentoring first-year students through the Archway program. Anika has also gained valuable experience as a clinical research assistant. So it's really nice to have you on today's episode.
Thank you for having me. I am super excited.
So just to start off the interview, what inspired you to pursue a medical career?
Ooh, yeah. This one's a really hard one to answer just because I feel like there are so many different factors. But I'm someone who really values being in tune with my body, so I work out as much as I possibly can. I'm also a dancer, so anatomy and physiology have always been so interesting to me. And then another big factor is my dad. My dad also has a background in medicine. So from a very young age, I've been like around him, I used to play in the next room while he checked like patients in another room at his clinic. We have had a lot of conversations about like different conditions as I grew up. So medicine's like very familiar and comforting to me in a way. And I was like, it would be so cool if I could apply my own skill set and help patients out. So I'm really just looking forward to that and hope I'll get the opportunity to do that. Yeah.
That's so nice. So you really just grew up like interested in like the healthcare field then, I guess.
Yes. And no, I won't lie. I mean, I did have other like interests as well. I love the art so much, and things like that. But those were like phases. I feel like medicine has always been like a constant. And I've actually made, actionable steps towards that goal, which I feel like it's very hard to find the discipline to pursue careers that you're not really passionate about. So I was like, okay, I like this and I'm working towards it. And maybe this is right for me. Yeah.
That's so nice to hear. So you are a McMaster Health Science student. So do you think you could tell us a little bit about health science programs offered in different universities across Canada and why you decided to pick McMaster over the other ones?
Yes. Okay, so obviously there's the McMaster Health Sciences program, and then there are health sciences programs at Waterloo and Western as well, I believe. At Queen's as well, that's a big one. And that's about it for health sciences. But I believe Western also has a medical sciences program, which would be, I think, interesting for people who are interested in pursuing healthcare. And I think life sciences programs are also an option at U of T and McMaster. So I did apply to a few of these programs back in grade 12, and I ended up picking McMaster Health Sciences just because I understood that it was a very close-knit community and it offered inquiry-based learning. So I'm someone who really enjoys, connecting with my professors, connecting with my peers, engaging in collaborative learning, and having the creative freedom to present my knowledge as I see fit. And that's what McMaster offered me back as much as I knew in grade 12, right? I didn't know that much about the program, but I was like, okay, I think this is right for me. But I was not let down. And yeah.
So, what are the differences between health science and life science programs?
Yeah, I can speak for McMaster specifically. McMaster Health Sciences is very project based, right? Or inquiry based, you can say. We do a lot of group work and really a lot of research on our own to then present our findings and work on things that we are passionate about. So you get a lot of opportunity to build not just yourself as a scholar academically, but also as a human, because emotional intelligence is just as important as like analytical intelligence or academic intelligence. And the way we're tested is different for different courses. So, for example, we might have essays, we might have poster presentations, and things like that. But for life sciences, it's very traditional testing methods. And I believe most high schoolers are very like well equipped to do well in those tests. So like standardized exams, multiple choice, short answer questions, things like that. And the courses are very, hard science based. So things like science, chemistry, there's physics, math, and stuff like that. So it's basically an extension of high school. Yeah.
What do universities, including McMaster, I'm sure you've had some experience with this while applying or like with people you meet too. What do they typically look for in candidates who are applying to health science programs?
Right. I feel like I was always confused, especially in grade 12. I was like, do I need to like list out all my extracurriculars? Do I need to get that, set? Is it my grades? It is a bit confusing, but I think the most important factor was your GPA or your top six average. So universities look at your top six average, i.e., the grades from your top six courses. So that's the first factor. And I don't really remember putting down my extracurriculars ever in my OUAC application, which is weird now that I think about it. Just because I remember doing so much in high school, but they never really asked for it. So yeah, I think grades are a big one. And then supplementary applications. So I don't think every single program asks for supplementary applications. For example, I remember U of T Life Sci didn't ask for anything, but McMaster Health Sciences and Queen's Health Sciences do have a supplementary application. So those are basically just mini essays that you need to write. Um, but yeah, I think that's all that universities look for. So I think to be really competitive for a university program, you should probably optimize your GPA.
Yeah, I've heard that Canadian universities specifically only look at like your grades and not extracurriculars as much compared to like the States, for example.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um,
Sorry, I can't really
yeah,
speak on the
yeah.
States because I never really applied there.
But then you could also mention them in like specifically for Queens or McMaster in those supplementary essays, right?
Yes. Yeah. I was going to speak on that as well. I think you have to be really strategic about how you support your answer with your lived experiences. So I would say when you are writing your essays, be as authentic as possible, and to provide life experiences that really connect to the question. Because I realize that some students, what they do is they just like list their extracurriculars in their essays to show that they have experience, but that actually doesn't get you points. So definitely make sure that the club that you're listing, for example, or your volunteering experience, you connect it back to the question. Yeah.
Makes sense. So, on the same note of like extracurriculars, I know that universities, a lot of them don't ask for them, but even if it's just to figure out if you're interested in a career in medicine, what high school extracurriculars would you recommend to someone that's like sort of leaning towards a science career?
Ooh, I did HOSA for I think 3 to 4 years. I can't remember how many years, but HOSA was definitely one of the like gateways that got me super, excited about medicine because you see all of these people who are so interested in healthcare. You compete with them. There are so many different categories, so I would definitely recommend HOSA. Like you could do forensics, you could do clinical nursing, there's just so much to it. And I think it would be a great introduction for anyone who's like, iffy or just starting to get interested, even. But other than that, I don't really have health sciences specific extracurriculars, but I would recommend just pursuing your other interests as well. Because now that I'm applying to medical school, I realize that they really look for people who have other interests as well and have a narrative about themselves, right? They know what values they have and what they're interested in. So, for example, I mentioned this earlier. I love the arts. I dance a lot. So I joined, the dance team at my school. I like council. So I joined the president's council. I like writing. So I was an editor in chief for my newspaper. So whatever makes you you, I think really look into that because that's going to help you out in the future for sure.
So I know that you were an ICDC competitor for DECA. DECA is a crazy competitive at my school. It's like everyone like aspires to sort of get to that level. So just what do you think it takes to like sort of get there at like these really competitive competitions?
For HOSA, I did clinical nursing. Yep, ILC. So I know they're super competitive, but I think to really hack the system, you need to understand how the competitions work. I think that's so important, like realizing what they're exactly looking for, because like even if you know a lot about business or you know a lot about medicine or healthcare, it's not going to help if you're not able to appeal to the judges' expectations. So I think that was really big for me because I remember in my first year, I didn't really do well. I didn't even make it to like the top 10 in HOSA, I remember. And DECA, I was like, I got my marking sheet for, we had like this mock thing at my high school for DECA. And I got my, like the judge score back. And I was like, oh my goodness, okay, I need to really figure this out. But then as I, tried again next year, I was like, okay, I'm getting the hang of this. I understand. They're looking for this, this, this. For HOSA, for example, I did clinical nursing and we had 2 rounds. So in the first round, we had an MCQ exam. And then for the second round, we had practicals. So I realized, okay, this is the content I need to learn and, take it seriously, understand how I learn. And then for second round, I really practiced the skills, like the practicals. So it's just a lot of it has to do with getting used to the format.
No, I remember like my first year in DECA because I'm going into my grade 11 year now. I
Mhm.
remember doing so bad on those like the practice role plays like done at my high school. They were like so terrifying. So moving past high school and more into like university, what was it like adjusting to university life? And was there anything that was sort of like shocking or surprising to you?
Yeah. Looking back, just thinking about my first year, oh my goodness, I was a baby. It's crazy, when you transition from high school to university, you feel like, oh my goodness, I'm actually an adult now, or I will become an adult soon, right? But there's just so much growth that's going to happen in university, so don't even worry. In first year, I think the biggest surprise for me was the amount of freedom that we got. Um, and it's not only in terms of like in high school I lived with my parents, right? But in university now I live in first year I lived on campus on res, and then now I live in a student house with my friends. So it's not only that social freedom that you get, but there's also the academic freedom. You have to make your own schedules, and there are so many options to choose from. Do I want the 9 a.m. slot or do I want the 5 p.m. time slot? Moving your courses around, figuring out what extracurriculars you want. There are like over 100 clubs at McMaster, and I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know what's happening. So I think it was definitely overwhelming trying to figure out what worked best for me because in high school, my schedule was set basically, right? The school told me I'm taking this class at this time. This is what's due at this time. My teachers reminded me like every single day. But in university, you're kind of like all on your own, and not in a bad way. It's like you have the freedom to decide what's best for you. And for someone who's just transitioning from high school to university, it's not an easy thing to adapt to, right? Because we're not used to making decisions for ourselves on such a large scale. So yeah, I think that was the biggest one for me.
I'm sure that took some getting used to. So, in McMaster, like the health science program, do you have opportunities to take different like electives, like business courses or other courses available to you?
Oh yes, 100%. I don't know about other programs, but in health sciences, each year we get a designated amount of units for electives, and electives are basically whatever other courses you want to take that are not mandatory. So I remember I love English, so I took English in my first year, and I also took psychology. So you have a lot of space, and as you progress through the years, you get even more and more space. Like for example, last year I had so much space, I couldn't figure out what electives to take. So you definitely get a lot of opportunities. And specifically at McMaster, there's a lot of different programs you could take. Let me think. Psych, English, as I said. There's creative writing courses. I believe one of my friends took like this vocal training course as well. There's a lot of
Oh, like
options.
music?
Yeah. Um,
Oh, okay.
it's super cool. Yeah.
That's so nice. So I've heard that McMaster Health Sciences uses a problem-based or like PBL learning approach. So what is this? And like how's it different from other like I guess approaches in university, like lecture style?
hmm so we have a mix. We do have lectures as well, but I think the lectures happen more so as we progress into the upper years. For example, for in second year for anatomy and physiology, we have lectures. But then we also have tutorials where we actually problem solve. We get cases, we get case studies, and then we figure out, what condition we're looking at, what systems are involved and things like that. But that's second year. In first year, for health sciences specific courses, there's a lot of, as I mentioned earlier, group work. I can speak on one course specifically. It's called Interdisciplinary Problem Solving in Health or something like that, if I remember correctly. And there we had guest lecturers come in every week or every other week. And based on the information we received from them, we looked at like social epidemiology, and researched how, the social determinants of health and things like that. And it was up to our group to decide, which condition we wanted to focus on, which lens we wanted to look at, like biomedical, social, etc. So there's just a lot of like open ground. Yeah, so they provide you with these lectures, this knowledge, and it's up to you to come up with, topics that you're interested in, research them, and apply the skills and knowledge to your specific research question. Yeah, and to compare that with other programs, as I mentioned earlier, other programs focus a lot on traditional testing, lecture, tutorial, where you discuss the lecture content, and then you have like midterms tests and things like that. So that's the difference. Yeah.
So you also mentioned that you're planning on applying to med school.
Mhm.
So how is research important for people that do aim to apply and get into med school? And how do you sort of like find research positions and like opportunities while you're in university?
I think research, okay. I started with my research, academic research pretty late in my university experience. But I think the main purpose of research is to figure out what you are interested in, specifically in healthcare, if that's what you're pursuing. So, for example, I got really interested in cancer research, allergy, and immunology, and things like that. So I could not tell you if, med school thinks research is like super important. But for yourself, I think it would be really good to just get involved in research from the get go so that you yourself understand, what you are interested in. Are you interested in clinical research? Are you interested in being in a wet lab? Do you like dry lab? Do you even like research at all? Is that, your vibe?
How do people get into research and like find research opportunities?
I personally was very scared to even reach out to anyone and get, started with research, but you just have to start off with cold emailing sometimes. So what I did was and it's really sad sometimes because they don't really get back to you, but if you're lucky, you will hear back. And if you don't, you can always go up to, professors who you take classes with. I think that's also that's an amazing way to connect with the professor if you like their research, and just ask them in person. They can see you take the initiative, and they can see, personally that you are interested in what they do. So definitely take advantage of that. But in terms of cold emailing, you can definitely find like faculty directories that have all professors and the research they do, depending on which university you go to. And then you can look at their research interests, and whatever you are interested in, just reach out to them. Usually, professors will actually take students who have no experience in research, right? Because if you are just starting off in university, chances are that you won't have experience, and that's totally okay. So just being as authentic as possible and really being interested in that research is very important, and personalizing your email as well. Just don't reach out to someone because you're desperate for research. Reach out to them because you are, desperate to work with them specifically. Yeah.
I'm sure research also helps later if you're like considering a career in research, or even if it's like figuring out what you want to specialize in, like
Mm-hmm.
way in the future. I'm sure it helps like narrow down, what you're interested in, what you want to be doing. So,
Yes, exactly. I took a course, it was pathoanatomy last year, and my professor actually did medical school, I believe. And then they were like, I liked research a lot more. So now they, are a researcher. So it's very interesting. But they also teach medical students at McMaster. So I just think it's so cool how research does open up doors for you.
I'm sure you've done a bit of research into this, but what does the process of applying to medical school look like? And things like, like your GPA and the MCAT.
Yes. Okay. So, in terms of the timeline, Canadian med schools open their applications. It's called OMSAS. Just like OUAC, it's OMSAS. But they open in July, I believe, and then they're due October 1st. So, the MCAT is a big component of applying to med school. I believe all schools except for Ottawa take your MCAT into consideration. McMaster only looks at your cars section. When I was in high school, I didn't even know what sections the MCAT had. I had no idea what the MCAT was, so I'm just spitting like all these sections out. If you don't understand, it's all good. You'll realize later what they are. But yes, the MCAT is a big exam, 7 hours long, so you gotta really grind and get that done. And I believe a competitive score is like 510, 515, or above. So that's one part, and your GPA is also very important. I won't lie, med school is very competitive, especially given that we don't have that many in Canada compared to the US. So yeah, there's also something called Casper, which is an ethics test, and that's also required by some medical schools. Um, Other components of the application, I know U of T has essays, and there's also something called the ABS, which is a list of your extracurriculars. So while universities don't ask for your extracurriculars, med school does. So just remember everything you did in high school. So yeah, you just list them down, get verifiers, write like a sentence or two about what you did in that extracurricular. And yeah, I feel like there are so many moving parts to med school applications, taking care of your GPA, studying for the MCAT, doing extracurriculars, research, things like that. So it can definitely feel overwhelming. But if you really just break it down into different components and take it step by step, it's not that bad. So yeah.
Makes sense. So you talked a little bit about like faculty members and reaching out to them. And also, I believe you went to your dad's clinic when you were like younger. So have you had any like mentors just like, throughout your schooling and whatever? And like how have they influenced your decision to like go into medicine and apply to McMaster?
I already mentioned my dad. I feel like he's been just a constant pushing me to go to medicine, and telling me I have what it takes, because it is a long process and it's really hard to keep yourself disciplined. So I'm so grateful that I did have my dad showing me that it is possible, and seeing him work so hard has, given me that determination, right? I really want to work hard so I can, reach that goal that I've set. In terms of other mentors, I I think I mentioned this earlier, but I really like connecting with my professors and my teachers, and there have just been so many. I just recently went back to my high school to meet one of my English teachers, and I feel like she's also been a very great just support system. Even though I hadn't talked to her in like 3 years, but I went back and I was like, oh my God, you really just pushed me to become the best version of myself, and trusted me with leadership opportunities in high school. So I think just having all of these teachers and professors guide me and trust me to take on different leadership roles in school has been very important for me. I've had so many great mentors.
I'm sure you've thought about this as well. Do you or any other health science students that you know of have a plan B if they're not accepted into medical school? And sort of what other career paths can you take with like after health sciences?
Yeah. When we're specifically talking about medicine and people who are pre-meds, there's definitely research, as we mentioned earlier. That could be an option, and that could be, again, clinical research, or it could be academic research, so wet lab or dry lab. So that's definitely an option. People also consider doing masters to further their education and open more opportunities for themselves. PhD, right? All of those options are available. Um, when it comes to McMaster Health Sciences specifically, I will say not everyone is interested in medicine, even if they do enter health sciences. And I think that's like a big myth that was, really talked about when I first entered my first year. That health sciences is not necessarily a pre-med program, even though it does set people who are interested in medicine on a good path. So I know people who've done law. I know people who have, opened up businesses after health sciences. So again, there's just a bunch of doors that open for you once you enter a university.
So, would you say that a lot of people that don't get into med school go apply to like the States or the Caribbean? Or do they typically like go pursue a PhD or like research?
There's just so much diversity in what choices people make, but I know of a lot of people who do end up applying to the States, and sometimes States is their first option. Like they don't even apply to Canada. So I've seen people like that too. And yeah, there's just so much you could do. But I also know people who are now doing their masters and then later they get into med school. Um, I feel like a lot of pre-meds are worried about the timeline, and rightfully so, right? It's a long haul. There's so many years involved, of studying. Like, for example, I was just talking to one of my friends today, and she's doing accounting, and she's about to graduate, and she's like, oh, I start working full time like next year. And I was like, oh my goodness, I have to wait like 5 more years. This is crazy. But yeah, um, I guess we have to realize that it's not always going to be a straight linear path. And if you do need to take like a gap year, work at a clinic, work at a hospital, go abroad, do something like that, that is totally okay. There's just so many options for people to pursue. Yeah.
That's good to know because then, everyone sort of has like a backup. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it definitely sounds that there is a lot of different paths and opportunities after. So, how do you maintain a work-life balance between like your schoolwork and your social life?
Honestly, I have learned the hard way that I can't do everything at once. Um, because I remember I like getting involved in a lot of things. I feel like it's just fulfilling for me to pursue my different interests and do as much as I can. But over the past, how many years? 3 years of university, I've learned that I really need to set a boundary with myself and prioritize what really matters to me and what's important in a given moment. So, for example, saying yes to specific opportunities, but saying no to others, right? And it's okay to do that. I think that's something that I learned the hard way because in the past, I would say yes to everything I possibly could, and then I'd, be stuck everywhere and I couldn't really give it my all in one thing. So, quality over quantity has been a big one for me. Doing things that really make a difference for me and that are meaningful to me. I think that's been the best for me. And also just really prioritizing academics and self care. Keeping a calendar because I forget things a lot. So writing them down because no one's reminding you what to do in university. It's all on you. Um, also having a good support system, I think is very important. So understanding that you can lean on, faculty, like staff. You can reach out to them if you need accommodations, if you have questions. connecting with your peers, connecting with friends. It's also very important, just as important as academics. Yeah.
I feel like I'm really similar in terms of like extracurriculars, as in I'll like want to do a ton of things. And I won't have the time to do it. But yeah, it's definitely tricky, I'm sure, like starting to say no to certain things, especially as someone with like a lot of different interests. So, just to finish off the interview, what advice would you give to high school people who are considering a career in like medicine or even just sciences in general?
Hmm. I would say really just put faith in yourself. As I was, making that transition from high school, or even just going through high school, knowing that I was going to pursue medicine, I was very focused on external circumstances to tell me that I was ready or that I was built for this career or that I was capable of doing things. But I think it's so important that you realize that if you put your mind to something, you literally have that locus of control is inside of you, right? It all comes from within. That I'm not trying to sound corny. That is not what I mean. But you have the power to build your own skill set is what I'm trying to say, right? If there is something you are interested in, don't be afraid to pursue it, um, and get over that fear earlier on. Or do it anyway. Even if you're scared, do it anyway, because that's how you're going to figure out what is really, what path is right for you. For example, for a long time, I was scared of, trying out for things like council, putting myself out there. But I realized I really like campaigning. I really like talking to people. So if you learn that earlier on, you can build on that skill set and then find more opportunities for yourself and open up more doors. So yeah, don't be scared of the world around you and understand that you are a force to be reckoned with and you can do anything you put your mind to. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. I'm sure you're really, really busy. It was so nice to have you here.
Well, thank you so much. It's been so long since I've talked about high school, my past experiences. It feels really good. Yeah.